Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Latest in Travel podcast by Guestcentric. I'm very excited to have with me today David Millili, who is the chairman of the board at GAIN, which is a leading advisory firm for travel and hospitality innovation and growth. Recognized as one of the 100 most powerful people in the USA hospitality scene, David brings nearly 3 decades of leadership expertise across the hospitality sector. And he is also the co-host of the Modern Hotelier, which is one of the most popular podcasts in the industry. So David, first of all, thanks very much for joining us. It's really great to have you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I feel old now when you say, whenever I hear how many years in the industry and it gets up, it feels like yesterday it was 20, now it's 30. So anyway, but thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, the time flies when you're having fun, and I'm sure you've had a lot of adventures and stories to tell, like from the industry. Do you mind giving a bit of a background about yourself, like how you got into the industry, what you've been up to leading up until today, just for our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So, really, I got started. I needed a job when I was putting myself through college. A friend of mine was going to Cornell Hotel School, and he said, well, just go to any hotel, you'll get a job. And I got a job as a union busboy at the Hyatt in downtown Pittsburgh. And it kind of just attached to me, hospitality. I just thought it was the coolest thing to be working in a hotel, and ended up switching and, working every job you can imaginably think in a hotel. Ran hotels in New York City, lived on property in New York City as general manager. And then when the internet took off, saw the opportunity to kind of move and pivot to the tech side of things. And so had a couple startups, mainly around digital marketing and booking engines. Then was fortunate enough to sell my company to Pegasus, which at the time was a big company in the space. Became CEO of Pegasus. And then since then, the last 10 years have been several C-level roles, advisory work. I'm on NYU's incubator as a mentor. And recently, was able to be CEO of Logic, which is an AI-powered revenue management system. Excited and looking forward to all the great things that GAIN is bringing to the table, and love hosting the Modern Hotelier with my co-host Steve.
Great. Yeah, it's a lot. It's always interesting to hear people that start with sort of more of the operational experience from the hotel side and then pivoting towards tech. What kind of made you or sort of inspired you to make that switch? Was it just sort of identifying the opportunities in that space, or?
I was very fortunate. So there was another general manager in New York City. His brother-in-law was going to invest in this idea he had, which was there was a site called City Search, which was really these portals for cities where you could search what was going on in New York, San Francisco, Miami. So we were going to create these niche portals that were like Times Square, South Beach, Vegas Strip. And we failed miserably. But during that process, we noticed that all the hotels, the independent hotels, didn't have a way to take reservations on their website. And so we pivoted and we built a booking engine. And so in 2000, we were enabling mostly New York City hotels at the time, but independent hotels to actually take reservations on their website, which they couldn't, and there was no other means to do so, meaning the brands all had kind of booking engines, but the independent hotels were just emailing back and forth. So that's what drove me. And then just, I've always liked helping hotels, especially independent hotels, do more to drive more direct bookings. And that's kind of been my career path.
And what would you say, sort of based on your experiences up until today, like how have, because obviously the industry, I mean, as we all do, face like different challenges and opportunities. And like as the industry has evolved like so much, how would you say, like just looking at like I guess hotels and independent hotels and so on, how have their challenges kind of evolved in comparison to like before and versus now? And what would you say are like some of the I guess the solutions or like some of the things they should be thinking about in terms of these challenges?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the problem is the same. I mean, the hotels want more direct bookings. So whether it's 2004, 2024, it's always been how do we get more direct business? So I think the problem's the same. I think what's making it unique for hotels right now is there's so many different options for them and so many vendors vying for that relationship and that connection with the hotel. So right now it appears that hotels are still not, they're not up to date with the way they approach search engine optimization or pay-per-click or even email marketing. If you sign up with an independent hotel for their email list, you probably don't get an email. If you get one, it's not personalized. So I think all the challenges are the same. I think right now, though, for hoteliers, it's probably just a little overwhelming because there's so many different vendors that they have the opportunity to work with. But again, we're still an industry that needs to adopt new technology and try to advance what we're doing as an industry.
And what would you say, because this is a question I've asked a few people as well, because I think it's interesting to get the feedback on that. But with all the sort of, I guess, different technologies and different vendors that are out there, like what would be your recommendations, like for hotels to kind of prioritize, like what makes sense for their business?
Yeah, well, I think that there's a couple of things. So I think, they got to have the right digital marketing company, whether it be a standalone or part of the CRS offering. They really need to make sure that their website is up to par and evolving and looking at what's going on in other spaces like retail. I think that, hotels still are afraid of AI and they're afraid of revenue management and systems that are, able to process information in a way that they can. So I always use the analogy of when's the last time you used a physical map to get to your destination? And the answer is you haven't. You use a GPS, and that's because the GPS can take all these data points. So whether it be traffic, construction, accidents, and get you to your destination in the quickest possible route. And that's what revenue management does. I mean, the AI behind it really basically processes all this data, whether it be events, on the book data, comp set, market data, flights, events. So I think for hotels, it's just really embracing these new technologies. Something as simple as, I travel a lot and probably 2 out of 10 hotels use text messaging or could be using WhatsApp to actually communicate with me and ask me, how's my stay going? And they still just haven't embraced those technologies. And while we sit here and we complain about labor shortage and challenges, there are technologies that'll help. So, rather than having somebody call the front desk, get put on hold to just find out what's the Wi-Fi password or what time does breakfast start, AI and text messaging or WhatsApp can actually solve that problem and just communicate with the guest. And it doesn't take away from the guest experience, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, if anything, it gives more time to actually add that value as employees, and not do that, I don't know, the mundane or the data processing and these kind of things as well. Cool. And sort of moving on to the Modern Hotelier project, what sort of inspired you to co-found that podcast, and what have been the highlights of your journey with that project so far?
Yeah, so I was advising a company that was based out of India that was launching a cloud-based property management system in the U.S. And they were looking to try to get some more traction. And and one of their salespeople, I said, well, why don't we do a podcast? Because I've been around a long time. I have people that I could get as guests. I think we could make it educational. And I think we could do something different in this space. And so our philosophy from day one was for it to be more about the education and the guest than about the host. And we are one of the few podcasts that has a strict format. We really do research on the guest. We ask them questions like, who did you admire growing up? Where would you like to go to? Sorry about that.
No worries.
So we really focus on the educational piece and getting to know the guests, getting to know where they grew up, getting to know where they work. And then once we get this comfort level and the audience has a comfort level, then we dive into really more industry topics. And the whole concept there is really to get to know the person before they start giving an opinion. And so it's been very successful for us. It's been very enjoyable. And the best thing for us is we run across people who listen to it and like it, and it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
And in sort of the conversations that you've had, like we sort of touched a little bit on like the challenges that hotels are facing, and sort of leveraging technology to sort of help solve those challenges. Are there any like stories or specific examples, like based on these conversations that you've had, that stand out to you in terms of examples to share?
Yeah, I would probably say nothing specific, but it's just clear that our industry is struggling with staffing. It's struggling with adoption of technology, and it's really trying to find its way kind of down this personalization um, type of route, where hotels are trying to figure that out and try to figure out how they deliver these exceptional guest experiences. And one of the things that's been very, very telling is that there's this um, post-COVID kind of awakening of just people and travelers wanting to really experience more and get out there. And so I think the numbers show that as far as travel. But I think that's probably the coolest thing about doing it and talking to people, is that there's this whole new wave of kind of this experience tourism, where people are trying to create these memorable moments for guests, and different, everything from a tent, which could be $3,000 a night, to a tree house, to just really delivering more of a unique experience in a traditional type of boutique hotel.
Yeah. I have to say that in terms of the experience-led travel, it's definitely, I mean, as a consumer, putting myself in that space, that's kind of my I don't know. I think I don't know if you agree, or if you find this with hotels, but like kind of a need to sort of shift more from, not just offering places to stay, but like that more holistic kind of upselling of different experiences, or different partnerships of different things. But yeah, and sort of in terms of role models as well, like in the industry, is there anyone that you like in terms of hotels and their business? Are there any specific hotels or hoteliers that you've interviewed and that kind of stand out to you in terms of how they're adapting to the evolution of our industry, and what they're doing right in this regard?
Yeah, I mean, we've had great guests. I don't want to leave anybody off the list. So I don't signal anyone out, but I'm very involved, and so is the podcast with ILC, the Independent Lodging Congress, and we really like what they're doing, because they're so focused on the indie market. And what I like about that, and Andrew, who's the head there, I mean, they do a great job of bringing in all different components, whether it be design, food and beverage, accommodations, all different type of things into their events, which I like. And it's really kind of for me, the only true kind of unique, independent type of experience. And so I enjoy that. And Andrew's been a guest. We've interviewed a bunch of people. We were the official podcast of that event in Sausalito earlier this year. And, it's just amazing to be involved with people like that, who are really just 100% focused on independent.
Yeah. I can imagine it's inspiring to hear all the different experiences and strategies, and yeah, always good to hear. And kind of moving on a little bit, I guess, looking forward in terms of how our industry is evolving. What would you say are your top predictions for our industry in the next, I don't know, 5 years, that may or may not surprise our listeners, and why?
Well, I've been using the term EI because everybody's focused on AI. And what I mean by EI is emotional intelligence. And I feel that there's this lack of, and my post will come out before this airs, but, for example, I stayed at a resort in California last month, and they basically charged me 5% because they were explaining how they were having a difficulty that the minimum wage was increased, and they had to pay those wages to the guest. Now, for me, that's a lack of emotional intelligence, because they could just figure out how to charge me $12 for a hamburger versus $10, and not have me get that that emotion at the end of the meal that I'm somehow responsible for whatever the government's doing and
Yeah.
their problems. Like that wasn't really the way I wanted to end my meal. I stayed in an Airbnb, and my last experience of that stay was working as a housekeeper, taking all the linens off the beds because that's what they instructed us to do. And so for me, the emotional side of that and the emotional intelligence that's kind of lacking in some places. Everyone's afraid of artificial intelligence. I think we need to start looking about, kind of just this common sense behavior on how we treat people. So those are just two examples. I'm sure there's many, many more, but why should I be told that a restaurant has to charge me something? And they're very clear telling me it wasn't going to the employee. It was just their money. So again, to me, I think some of the predictions are we're going to get back to this emotional intelligence of the way we treat people and the way we, handle certain situations that everyone's afraid AI is going to screw up, but sometimes we screw it up ourselves just as much as AI could.
And what would you say are some ways, because it's interesting that you sort of brought up the like I've spoken about this before, but not referring to it as emotional intelligence, but I guess getting back to being more of a service orientated industry. And what would be some of your suggestions in terms of how, rather than being like, spooked by AI, like actually leveraging it to get back to that, service orientated model and actually differentiating and, looking at hotels specifically, like differentiating themselves with their service?
Yeah. I mean, I think it comes down to time. And I think, we were discussing earlier, even something just like, text messaging or WhatsApp, eliminating some of the things that people have to do that they don't have to do them. So in other words, if AI can take care of routine requests, why not let AI do that? If AI and certain technologies can allow you to pre-register or check in or check out, why not allow AI to handle that so you don't have to have that human element? One of the biggest issues, in the States too, is also everyone's going cashless, so they don't have money to tip employees, but there's all these programs that are out there that enable that, but the adoption of them are still very, very low. So I think, when you look at AI and just technology as a whole, you were touching on it, it shouldn't be fear. It should be like, how do we embrace it to help the service? How do we embrace it that actually improves the guest experience, instead of just being so kind of assuming it's going to take away from the guest experience, when in a lot of cases it's just going to enhance it.
Yeah. And it's interesting also, like sort of going to even looking at like personalization and stuff, and like the common sense that you referenced earlier. Sort of, I see a lot of, and it's not just in hospitality, but you go somewhere and then you get like a communication that is kind of tailored around your past behavior of something, but it's not speaking to the heart of what you actually want as a consumer. And like one example that always springs to mind is like I went, and visited the UK once, like to visit like my family there. And then afterwards got like, email blasts about like, top 10 places to visit, during the summer. And I'm like, it's not really the place that I would, go to for the summer. And I guess sort of looking at that specifically in terms of personalization and the expectations for getting those personalized experiences, are getting, consumers getting more demanding in that sense. It might seem very complicated. Like, well, I think it is, like a lot of, to your point earlier, hotels are very overwhelmed, and it's, how do we meet those different, demands? And what would be some of your suggestions on how they could leverage, technology to do that?
Well, most hotels, or a lot of hotels, aren't really, using the data that they have in front of them. So, I think there's some great ways of just, to your point, when did the guest stay with me? Recognizing the guest is coming back, recognizing, or maybe rather than trying to have the guest fill out your standard survey on, what was your check-in process? Was your room clean? But we don't really take these opportunities to ask any questions about, what do they like? What did they like about the property? Why were they in London? Why were they, if they were in the restaurant, what was their favorite meal? What did they order? Things of that nature. So I think there's little data points that we could start to harvest, because everybody, I think, in our industry looks for this holy grail where it's like, oh well, if everything could be integrated and blah blah blah, and we know this and we know that and blah blah. And I'm like, let's just start with some of the basics. Like, most hoteliers don't even know where their OTA business comes from. When you ask them, they'll tell you, oh well, the front desk doesn't enter in the address of where they came from. So you can ask a hotel, what's your percentage of OTA bookings, and they'll tell you, oh, Expedia is 20%, booking.com is 25%, but they can't even tell you within those, where are the guests coming from, because they don't take the time to even enter it. So they can say, oh, well, booking.com, majority of my business is from Germany, but Expedia, most of it is from the US, and what state from the US. So I think there's all this data that's right at our fingertips, or at hoteliers' fingertips, that they're just not really starting to leverage. And so if they can start there, then you can start getting more down into the personalization. Because if I was a hotelier, I want to know what countries my OTA business is coming from, so I can start marketing directly to those. And then the next layer is getting into the personalization, and is it family, is it business, and some of those things. But I think we got to start somewhere, and I think hotels, maybe it's just getting started, which is tough. It's kind of like when you decide you want to lose weight and you got to start working out. It's tough to get in the gym the first couple times, but once you get a habit down, that makes it a lot easier.
Do you think it's down to also like technological like constraints, like maybe they're not consolidating all of that data properly, or they don't have like a way of looking at that in an efficient way, and that could be something that AI could solve as well? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think, most of the data is trackable, meaning that there's, if whatever property management system you're using, even if you're using a legacy based versus a cloud based, the fields are there for state, city, postal code, things of that nature as a starting point. It's just really capturing the data, or making an effort to actually do that. And then, as we discussed, then the next level is learning who the guest is, knowing when their birthday is, knowing if they're a repeat guest, knowing what they like when they go to the bar, the restaurant, knowing what to serve them up, as far as if it's an email messaging platform. There's also retargeting. So it's really, really different. So, if you're going to London and I'm going to London, and we both go to a hotel's website in London, your messaging when you go to leave, if you've already put your email address, or messaging coming up, should be most likely probably different than mine. And hotels, the technology is there. It's just really adopting it and taking the time, to work through it and set it up.
Yeah. And what are some ways, because obviously I think like getting that first party data is like the most important, like for the hotels. And in addition to sort of leveraging that from like guests that have stayed before, are there any other ways that they could prioritize really gathering that data about their guests?
I think, for me, the biggest thing is just capturing a lot of the data at check-in. There's other ways to leverage that data. There's a lot of things when you step back and you think about it, whether it be, upselling, trying to get somebody to move from a deluxe double to a suite, to whether it be, offering an early check-in, late checkout. That data should be captured somewhere. And again, I'm not a CRM expert, but it should be captured. So again, if I come back, they should know that this person already upgraded to a suite. Let's make sure we get that message to them. They requested a late checkout. They most likely probably need a late checkout this time. Where I get frustrated is when the technology is there and then it's not fulfilled. So without naming companies, there's a lot of upgrade companies, but I hate this idea of the night before I go to check into a hotel asking me if I'd like to almost wait list for an upgrade, because to me, that's like that feeling when you're on the wait list for an airline to get an upgrade is like that stress. Like, am I going to get the upgrade or not? Where hotels should know, like, hey, I can upgrade you. You're checking in Monday. I can upgrade you Sunday and or tell you to pay for an upgrade, or I can get you an early check-in. I should be able to get those things done. So I think we need to do a little bit of a better job of leveraging the technology to make that experience much better for the guest.
And sort of putting yourself in the position of the guests and your experiences and your travels and things like that. Are there any, because obviously, I mean, the big chains and stuff, they have their loyalty programs and they have their things, down pat. But like in terms of more independent properties and groups and things like that, are there any specific brands that sort of stood out to you as getting the communication right? And is there any kind of, I don't know, I guess stories or examples to share on that front?
Well, on the good side, I'll say the name. On the bad side, I won't say the name. So on the good side, Citizen M has done a great job, I think, in their self check-in process, their kiosk, and this concept of having kind of a 24/7 food and beverage entity on the property. So I took a red eye to Heathrow, stayed at a Citizen M, checked myself in, and I was probably within 3 minutes, I was in my room. I was able to come back down, get some food, get something to drink. And I had great interaction with the staff at the bar and the restaurant. So it didn't take away from me not interacting with somebody who was just going to ask me, are you checking in? Blah, blah, blah. Give me your credit card. I did all that myself. It was simple. It was easy. Made my own key. It was like, great. Another brand which drives me crazy is, and I won't name them, but they always ask you if you'd like a mobile key if you check in through their app, and you never are asked at the front desk or never given a mobile key. Never. This probably 30 stays at this brand because with one of the companies I worked for, we had to stay at this brand, which was right by the office, and it just was amazing to me that every single time I would ask for a mobile key and check myself in, but I would still have to go to the front desk and do everything all over again. They had no idea I wanted a mobile key. They still handed me a regular key, and it was like, it was just frustrating because it was like, why are you having me go through this process, and you're not actually delivering on what you're showing me? So those are two that I like to point out, because you can have something which should be great, which is mobile key, which if the guest wants to embrace that technology, it's great. But then again, it's a major failure when you offer it and then don't deliver it.
Yeah. And what would be sort of your recommendations, I guess, to avoid that pitfall of not over-promising and under-delivering? Because that, I mean, yeah, it's a pet peeve for me as well, and not just for in this industry, but in every industry. It's like don't say that there's something there when it's you can't really or you can't deliver it properly. But what would be sort of your I guess your recommendations to avoid that?
So for me, it just comes down to training. You would be amazed, just for fun, next time you check into a hotel, ask the person who checks you in if they've ever seen a room. Okay. If they've ever been in one of the rooms that they're checking you into. And when I was GM in New York, like that was one of the things we always knew. Employees orientation, we had them go to rooms. So I would say even have that front desk agent stay at the hotel, or at least go through the experience of checking in and using a mobile key and kind of understanding what that experience is like, so they know what the guest is going through. Because that might sound like, oh, we got to train them, but if you really think about it, it's pretty simple. I mean, we used to even, back in the day before the internet, we used to actually, when you would check availability, when somebody would call into our hotel for reservations, we would always have a script that said, oh, while I'm checking for availability, let me tell you a little bit about the hotel and the area. So now, rather than that awkward silence, that front desk or reservationist was looking up the rate or checking availability, but was telling them and upselling them on why they should be there. Oh, we're located in Times Square. We're a block from Broadway. We're close to Macy's. We're in walking distance to this, that. So I think it just comes down to training. Yeah.
And would you say also, I think, like in terms of consolidating the different departments and getting everyone because it's interesting you brought up that exercise, and I will do that next time.
Yeah.
But I think also with certain hotels, sometimes you see, that there's different departments sort of pushing in one direction, but then, the hotel is getting bad reviews, for example, and then it's maybe housekeeping or, whoever's looking after the rooms or, those kind of experiences, they're not really aware that's what's like going on. So like, what would be kind of your recommendations to sort of get all the different departments like aligned and sort of under this like unified commercial strategy where everyone's kind of pushing in the same direction and having the same priority for the business?
Well, if you're the general manager, you're the CEO of the hotel, so you need to act like a CEO. So you need to be involved. You need to be communicating with the departments. You need to be reading those reviews. You need to be going and spot checking hotel rooms. And I had people laughing because I said, one of the things that's so funny is that when you are in a hotel and you use the bathroom in a hotel room, you seem to see everything that's wrong with it. And you just wonder, are people looking at, the dust on the vents that you see? They're looking at, the grout that's not properly or is worn away from the hotel or things of that nature. So for me, you got to lead by example. So if you're not, if you're a CEO of a tech company, you need to be sitting on demos. You need to be, asking your support teams, what are they getting? What's the information they're receiving? And if you're a GM, you need to be, if you're in your office, you're in the dark. You need to be walking around the property. You need to be in hotel rooms and checking out what's going on. And I think that's a little bit old school because now with technology, it's very easy just to sit there and look at your screen. But you should not only be looking at those TripAdvisor reviews, you should be finding out if you can figure out who that guest is, go to the room, see what the problem was, find out what the ticket which was created. Just more hands-on approach, I think.
Yeah. And sort of circling back just a little bit to, I guess we were looking at like the first party guest data, things like that, but kind of looking more broadly, and obviously one of the big challenges, and that has been the same for years, has been, getting more of that direct business and growing like the direct business. But what can hotels do, like in your opinion? I guess, I don't know if I should say do better, but like what ways can they actually strengthen those direct relationships with their guests in an effective way that will actually, I don't know, I guess like increase their share, like their direct share, like on their business and have those relationships?
Yeah, well, I think, people just have to care. And I think you have to have employees that care, from the frontline employees to management. And I think the biggest thing is, it doesn't cost anything to be friendly, to be nice, to just be more engaged when you're at the front desk. So it's like if we're so scared that technology is going to take away from hospitality, why is it that we're not scared that every hotel in the world that you check into, they ask you the same dumb questions? Are you checking in? Oh, can I get your credit card? Can I get your ID? But they never ask you. Some do, but majority of the time they don't ask you, how was your trip in? Or is this your first time to London? Oh, I see you're coming all the way from Phoenix. Wow, how was your flight? Which airline did you fly? Like a little something that just kind of sparks that. And there's always something that's unique, locally, or a different feel, something that you can pick out of all the noise that kind of, I think, share with your guests that could make it interesting. And then it's just, we were talking earlier just about having that data and knowing that, somebody's birthday is coming up, or knowing that they've been there before a couple times, and things of that nature. To me, that's where, we just don't really know. And even when we market to our guests, and email marketing just really hasn't changed in 20 something years. There's still really nothing personalized there. So I think, it's not easy. I'm not trying to, sugarcoat it and say every hotel should be like masters at, guest service and marketing. But I think that, leveraging the technology to do a better job is a good starting point.
And I think like sort of getting a bit more specific, like with all the, because it's complex and it might be like a bit overwhelming, but like in terms of areas to start, like as not ground zero, but like to start off, like the first steps, what would be, on your opinion, the first steps that the hotels should take in terms of priorities on how they can improve those experiences?
Well, for me, it goes back to, and I know it's not easy, but it's just it's training. So whether I'm staying at a 2-star or a 4-star hotel, the two things that I really want is I want people to be friendly to me, and I want the rooms to be clean. I want the property to be clean. Those aren't difficult things. Like I tell people, they say, what's one of your best examples of a guest experience? And I used to take the train to Penn Station, and then I would stop at a Dunkin' Donuts and I would get my coffee. And the women that worked at the Dunkin' Donuts knew me. They knew what I drank. They would just start making my coffee. And if I hadn't been in a week, because I've been traveling, they knew that I wasn't there. And they said, "Oh, we haven't seen you in a week. You know, when you're traveling, what's going on?" And that's a Dunkin' Donuts. So that was if I had a coffee and I didn't get a donut, but if I had a coffee and a donut, what's it going to be, $5-6? And that's like was amazing compared to maybe I'm spending $500 a night on a property where the person just says to me, checking in, I need your ID, things of that nature. So I think it's just starting off with realizing that we're in the hospitality business and there's this human element, and people, for the most part are good and want to see a smiley face and want to feel appreciated or asked how they're doing or how their day's going. So I think that's where I'd start before even technology, just making sure that you have the right people. And I always tell people, if you're miserable, then you need to change the job. It's like being in a relationship. If you're working in a hotel and you're not happy doing that, you should really, and the management should know, everybody should know, because people are spending a lot of money to stay in properties. Rates are all-time highs. And that's stuff that's free. The smile and the just acknowledgement of how is your day going is free.
And do you think that's something that's changed? Like, was it different? Like more, was service like years ago? Was it more like personal and service orientated? And is that something that kind of the industry is moving a little bit away from and needs to get back to, or is it something that has been like the age-old challenge that is just evolving with the times?
Yeah, I don't think there's been change. I think that, what I tell people is that, in the States, it's much more a job than a career. And in Europe, I feel like more people look at their jobs as a career and maybe possibly a career path, where a lot of people in the States who are working in hotels are just like, "Oh, well, this is my job till I go to the next thing that I do." So I don't think I don't think there's been any positive or negative change. I just think that, I think people, you know, I think people just, are expecting a little bit more as prices go up and things of that nature. And everyone's kind of, heads down in their device. So I think the impact of just the smile or that interaction can even be that much more empowering for somebody who's a guest of a hotel, because in the past, you weren't, if you think about it, 20 years ago when you were checking in, you maybe had a flip phone, but you weren't distracted. Now you're in line and you're like, okay, well, I'm checking my stocks, I'm checking my sports team. So that's the only change, is that there's been more of a kind of this technology wall that's been put in front of people, where that's where I think the opportunity is to make more of an impact, because there's less interaction. You think about it, like, here in the States, we don't call to order food. We have DoorDash. So we just go on our phone or our computer and we order. We don't have to speak to anybody. And if they get the order wrong, you're even more upset, because you're like, I put it right in the system. I typed, no pickles, and I got pickles. So anyways, I think the opportunity is greater. That's the biggest thing, the greater impact now, because there's less forced interaction.
Yeah. And sort of like looking at, because you mentioned, like, in terms of looking at the industry as like, okay, this is a job and it's a stepping stone to something else. Is there anything the industry can do as a whole to kind of, I guess, motivate people more in terms of like, I can see myself, or I can envision myself having like a long-term career in this space, and therefore I'm going to give it 110% the best that I've got, and just be the best that I can be in this area?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts off with the communication of understanding, as a manager, understanding what your staff what their objectives are as a career, and maybe, making sure that, you're guiding them and helping them, move through that journey. And then it's also just, taking care of the people that are good employees. I mean, I think there's, you know, in the States, there's a lot of hemming and hawing because the government steps in and sets minimum wages, or we have unions and unions step in. And at the end of the day, it's like, I think if you do the right thing, you can figure out how to make it all work. And that's kind of like what I was stating before with, why am I eating at a restaurant and they're telling me about their problem with minimum wage, and I'm paying for it versus them just running their business. So I think if you take care of the people that are good and people that you want, and you listen and that they want to go from a front desk clerk, or let's go even further, they want to go from a hotel operator, which is not as prevalent today, to a front desk clerk, to a supervisor, to a manager, to a rooms division manager, to a general manager. If you start to understand what people want, I think you'll be a better, manager. And I think that will help the industry as a whole, because again, if people are just happy and they like being a bellman, that's great, but make sure that they can feed their family and that, they're getting paid properly. And it's like with anything, sometimes there's just greed involved. And I just, it's, when you look at things, there's a lot more focus on, oh, wow, average rates are down, hotels, blah, 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 they're suffering, versus, well, they're record highs, and where's the money going? Like, so there's not a real connection between the two things, rates moving up and down, occupancies, and how that affects the employees. It just affects the owners. And I think if we start, making sure that all the hard work and everything trickles down to the employees, it can become more of a career, especially in the States.
Do you think it could also be down to, like, I guess, embracing technology better, in a sense that it also mitigates or eliminates those, I guess, parts of the job that are maybe not so interesting or great to do? Like, maybe it could be down to that as well. Would you say?
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, you're spot on. I mean, I think it's everything from, the way a request for extra towels gets processed in a timely manner, so that those towels get to the room, so the person's not waiting. It goes to the person being put on hold when they just have a simple question, or that just goes to maybe efficiency and housekeeping, getting the rooms cleaned in the proper order, so that that person who just took a red eye, the overnight flight, we can get him or her into their room, versus them, coming to the desk and saying, oh, we're sorry, check-in's at 4:00, check back with us. Things of that nature. There's that person who's waiting for the room, can you text message them, and say, hey, your room's ready, versus them having to come back and check. So I think you're spot on. I think the technology, there's a lot of ways that technology can improve just the guest experience and just efficiencies. And it's just a matter of just more and more hotels adopting it. And, we can use all the cliches. It's just, hotels that, it's not broke, don't fix it. This is the way we've always done it. All those things that everybody says, but, we didn't always have Netflix, and we weren't able to watch all of our shows instantly. We weren't able to get into some stranger's car, which is an Uber, and get to the airport without having to, dial for a taxi. So, change is inevitable, but you just have to embrace it, and the rest will take care of itself.
I think sometimes it's also down to not, because there's always, like, generating demand. Sometimes people, like, they need something, but they don't realize maybe right away that they need it. I don't know, what would be your suggestions in terms of, like, raising that awareness? Like, this is, look at your business. This could be the solution. I don't know. It's always something that I like to ask, because it's one of those challenges, I guess.
Well, no, I think look, it all comes down to communication, whether you're a hotel or you're a tech company. There's a lot of different areas, a lot of different touch points. And, as long as everybody feels that if there's open communication and people can communicate and articulate what what challenges are there. And when I ran hotels, I used to always say, yeah, we had a stand-up meeting with all the departments, and I would say you're always allowed to bring up and state a challenge or a problem as long as you have a solution.
Yeah.
Because if you're the one who's identified the problem and you don't have a solution, then that might just be life. There might be nothing we can do. So, you can't just sit there and, bitch and complain and be like, oh, we have this big line at the front desk. Okay, well, what can we do about that? How could we pre-reserve the rooms, pre-cut the keys, get the keys ready and what can you do to solve those problems? So for me, that's the communication and, and also, across departments, opening the lines of communication. So what I used to try to do when one of my tech companies, a couple of them, is have interdepartmental lunches. So I used to make people who weren't comfortable being around each other go to lunch. So it'd be a developer, a salesperson, a support person, and maybe me or some manager, and we'd all go to lunch. And it would be this kind of, okay, let's just get to know each other so you feel more comfortable talking about what are your challenges. So you're upset because the development timeline is unreasonable. Okay, well, why is that? Well, because I'm working on 6 projects, blah, blah, blah. So again, I think it just comes down to communication, whether it be, business or relationships. It's always, if you're talking and communicating, you can solve any problem.
Yeah. Breaking down the silos, I guess, also.
Yeah.
Great. And kind of looking at sort of going back to the subject of AI and looking at like revenue management specifically, and with sort of the increased, focus on like attribute-based pricing and so on, which kind of adds like, I guess, another layer of complexity for hotels in certain cases. What would be what are some of the ways, in your opinion, that AI could simplify the implementation of this kind of pricing model for hotels?
Well, the first thing is, if you're not, so I used to say, when I was at Logic, even if you don't choose us, you need to be using a system. You need a tool. You can't process all this data and make decisions on your own. You can, but it's just not really feasible. There's so many different moving pieces and so many data points that it's overwhelming. So for me, use a system. Get your rooms down first and then worry about everything else. Once you know that you're pricing your rooms properly, you can then figure everything else out. But again, it's almost like when we talk about the personalization. Don't worry about if the person likes red or white wine. Worry about, are they coming, what country are they from, and are they coming back to your hotel, and things of that nature. So try to get the big stuff down before you try to move too far down the path, because then it becomes also overwhelming, where you're like, wow, how am I going to figure out all this data? Get the basics right. Get a system. Don't allow people to put fences around it. So what I mean by that, there's a lot of systems out there that basically says that are rules based, not AI based. And what I mean by that is that the system people can set up the system that says, oh, when I get to 80% occupancy, raise my rate. When my competitors do this, raise my rate, lower my rate. Those are rule based. It's not using AI. And the challenge with that is, how do you know that if you hit 80%, you should only increase $5? Maybe it should be $15. You should be increasing it. And suppose your comp set sucks, and suppose they're pricing wrong. Why are you going to make a decision based off of your comp set? Because maybe they're wrong. So that's why, again, my whole thing is adopt the technology. It's got to be AI driven. It's just like a GPS. You're never going to be able to figure out the best route to take on your own or with a paper map. You need to use a system that helps you guide you to success.
And do you have any examples to share of like the certain capabilities, I guess, because also looking at price again, the move away from like looking at historical patterns, like, okay, I'm going to do my pricing around this season, or, how can hotels, I guess, leverage this to prepare for the unexpected and make sure that they're really maximizing their pricing to meet those like unexpected peaks of demand?
Yeah, well, I think, there's got to be a little trust too. So in a lot of the the AI driven revenue management systems, you can actually let the platforms work while you're sleeping. So if you're a New York City hotel that has a lot of EMEA business that's coming in from maybe it's coming in from Madrid or Barcelona or London, Berlin, you can set that system up so it could be, with the time change, there could be something that's happening or pickup that's happening at 5 o'clock in the morning, New York time, that the system could be adjusting your rates so that those international guests who are looking to book, could be getting the right data versus you waiting to wake up and say, oh, wow, the system's telling me to do these things. So again, is it perfect? So like, I think if you were to ask, if we go back to the GPS analogy, the first GPSs we used, a lot of times you'd see like where they told you your car's in the middle of a lake and you'd be like, this thing is horrible. Now you're like, this thing's amazing. It's telling me there's a cop, 0.5 kilometers ahead of me. So I think just, there's got to be this little bit of, things are improving and some trust factors and making sure that, we're human, we have to sleep, the hotels are not going to pay someone to do revenue management, 24 hours a day. So again, there's things that are happening while revenue managers are sleeping that the system could be adjusting and making sure that the hotel's not losing money.
Yeah. And what other areas, in terms of like hotel business operations, do you see AI having like the strongest impact, not only now, but like, going forward, and why?
Yeah, well, I think, I think the revenue management obviously is more kind of the financial piece of the business. I think AI and communication with guests is where I'm still surprised it hasn't taken off. So we discussed it earlier, whether it be WhatsApp or messaging, and just trying to eliminate those questions that you have. I think it's not as much AI, but this idea of you being able to select your own room, like you select your airline seat and things of that nature. I'm just surprised we're not there. I really am. And even like I said, with the upgrades, I'm really surprised that, most of the time you can't even secure your upgrade in hotels. You can't, it's not as seamless for you to even secure an early check-in or a late checkout. So I think that's where the AI is going to start to get smarter and start to get better and help hotels, just really improve the guest experience. But I think it's going to help hotels make more money, and it is going to help the guest experience. And, it's just a question of whether we embrace it or we fight it. And if we embrace it as an industry, whether it be on the tech companies and as the hotels, AI is only going to improve everybody's life.
And do you see it like, I guess, I mean, we are already seeing, with the likes of Chat GPT, but then also, with Gemini and the different search engines kind of getting more into that. I think for me, it's quite valuable in the sense that like, versus just going to regular Google search engine and like having to search and wade through a bunch of information to find what I'm looking for. But like having, AI like actually give me those very specific answers to very specific questions. That obviously, is quite an opportunity there. Do you see that, like, because I think, with the advent of Chat GPT, we were seeing, the race of, the different OTAs and all that, getting on that. But do you see that as like something that hotels should be thinking about? And if so, like what should they be doing to adapt to this?
Well, I mean, I think where like a lot of people I know who are like actually planning trips, they've used the AI to really help them plan their trip, like what they should be doing if they're traveling. They're traveling to Lisbon on holiday for 7 days. Create an itinerary for me. So I think hotels could sort of like start to do some of the work for their guests and start building that out. Like, hey, there could be a section of their website that's like, hey, looking for what to do while you're in Lisbon. Here's a 3, 5, 7 day itinerary already done for you. So yeah, the guests could do it on their own, but leveraging, I think where hotels are going to have to, it's not so much AI, but they're going to have to start leveraging video more. So that's one of the things that the Modern Hotelier we're doing. We're doing more hotel tours and video because hotels have to evolve on how their guests want to actually consume data or information. And if you think about it, like everybody's on TikTok, everybody's doing Instagram stories, everybody's on YouTube, and then you go to your hotel experience and it's a picture of the last time the hotel did renovations, and there's probably no video. And you're planning maybe, which could be a huge event. Maybe it's a wedding at a hotel, and you're like, okay, there's one picture, or maybe they had a model couple where they took, but there's no video, there's no interaction, there's no one talking to them or selling them. So I think, and maybe that comes through AI. I know there's some companies that are leveraging, they don't want they're afraid maybe if they do the video of their employee and they leave, it might go away. But there's now video AI where you could have somebody describing what to do at the hotel, about the restaurant, about local attractions. If you're having an event, what are the benefits of having the event at this hotel, location, things of that nature. So there's a lot of uses for it. And it just keeps getting better and better. It's amazing when you see these AI headshots or you see these AI videos, and you're like, they even have now the AI celebrity voices where you can just type what you want a celebrity to say, and it sounds just like Arnold Schwarzenegger or somebody like that. So
I've been seeing these funny ones of it's super random of like Gordon Ramsay, like what he'd be doing if he wasn't a chef.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
Very amusing. It's a bit scary. Like on the one hand, like, oh, okay, someone could just take my face and do all kinds of embarrassing stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
But at the same time, it's quite amusing and I guess fascinating to see as well just how it's evolving so quickly. Yeah. And but actually, and it's something I haven't used myself, but like I have been seeing a lot of apps kind of popping up in terms of travel, like planning the trips and stuff,
Yep.
but just using an AI assistant to do that. Do you use any at all? Like that?
I haven't, but I can just tell you that, I cheat. I mean, I use ChatGPT for LinkedIn posts. My niece, who's also my goddaughter, she asked me to marry her and her fiance last year, and I used ChatGPT to create a whole sermon. I wanted to do a poem on people who had passed away that couldn't be at the wedding, and it created a whole poem. So, and it's most of the time it's good. I mean, I'd be more worried if I was more of a writer. But some of these videos, like you were saying, some of the stuff that's coming out is pretty incredible. So people are just kind of creating, the creative stuff that's coming out is like, I think we're going to be scared, and it's a little scary, and I think we'll just get used to it. I think that's what it is. It's like it's kind of like when you think about retargeted ads when they first came out, and you would like look at something and then you'd go to another website and like, oh my God, it's following me. It knows that I'm looking for these Nike shoes. And now you're like, oh yeah, there's the Nike shoes. I think I might buy them. Okay, yeah, let me go back and click on. But we were in the beginning, we were scared and same thing. Oh my God, it's tracking you. Everything's listening in. And now we just kind of are like, oh yeah, okay, everyone's tracking us. Everyone knows where we're at. Everyone's listening in. And I think it was the same thing with AI and some of this stuff. We're just going to eventually be like, okay, well that's what we do. Yeah, that whole movie was AI. Great, it's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I have to say I have mixed feeling, like, because I do write, so I do use it a lot for I guess pieces that I'm not really super enthusiastic to write, like I don't know, press releases for me, or it's not a particularly creative thing that I like to to write. So Chat GPT is really useful for that. But I was a little bit triggered when I saw that there was a study that there were, I guess they showed like AI generated poetry versus classical poetry. I think it was even from like Shakespeare and stuff, to like a certain sample size. And most of them were like, they preferred the Chat GPT one, but I guess it also speaks to the nature of like how language has evolved and so on. But yeah, curiosity. Well, on that note, actually, I think we're at the end of our time here. But just before we go, what are you sort of looking into the future? And we've been sort of discussing that throughout our conversation. But is there anything specifically from an industry standpoint, from a personal standpoint? What are you looking forward to the most in the coming times, and why?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I love our industry. I mean, I love travel. I love staying in hotels. I like going to new places. So for me, I hope that we can leverage the technology, leverage AI, incorporate some of this emotional intelligence and common sense and all of it, and just continue to get better. And I think more and more people are wanting to travel and spend more money on travel and have less possessions, if that makes sense. Maybe, not, somebody told me once that you should buy your vacation home and rent where you live, because of your vacation home is eventually where you're going to want to like retire or be at. So I just, I don't have any, great crystal ball predictions. I just hope that we, continue to embrace technology without sacrificing the human element, because that's what's so important to our industry. And I think we can do that. So I think it's just, having that kind of awareness of, hey, we need technology. It's going to make our lives better. But we need to also take care of our guests.
Yeah. Well, that's a good hope for the future, and I have to say that I share your view on that. So yeah, let's see. Hopefully, as things go on, we'll see developments on that front. Well, it was really great to have you, and appreciated talking to you. And I learned a lot, and I'm sure our listeners will as well. And thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.